Welcome to the Bariatric Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kristin Lloyd, mindset mentor, somatic coach, and transformational guide for those on the path to true healing. Whether you've had weight loss surgery or on GLP-1s or simply seeking a new way forward with food and your body, this space is for you. This podcast is a mission to change the narrative, unlearning the patterns that no longer serve you, moving beyond quick fixes into deep, embodied healing, lasting mindset shifts, and true self-leadership. We are healing from the roots, rewiring the mind, regulating the body, and returning home to ourselves. We are here for growth rooted in honesty and self-trust because that, my friends, is the foundation of healing. So grab your cup of joe or your H2O and let's go. Welcome back, everybody, to the Bariatric Mindset Success podcast. I am your host, Dr. Kristin Lloyd, and I am here once again with Frances Vogel, one of the amazing Bariatric Mindset Success certified coaches that works alongside me. And I'm excited to have you back again for this episode. So welcome, Frances.
Thank you again for having me. It was such a pleasure to do the last podcast with you, and I'm so excited to be back again today. And we have a lot to dig into, right?
Yeah.
A lot of different topics came up last time, and different things we can bounce off of. So I'm excited to see where this one goes.
Same. So our topic that we're digging into is really about navigating identity, who we are after surgery, who we're becoming. And the question that we have that's kind of really leading this podcast is, who am I now? Or who am I now? Who even am I now? Right? And another thing that we're going to be weaving in is the idea of comparison, because wherever we are on our journey, whether, again, you're a newbie, just had surgery, or pre-op, most recent post-op, 3 months, 6 months, or multiple years post-op, and you're what they call a veteran, right? Bariatric veteran, which I think we are now, right?
Yeah.
Is that comparison can come up in terms of, well, this person is doing this and this person is doing that. And that's weaved into our identity. So we're kind of bringing that in. What comes up for you when you think of, navigating identity after surgery? And, we've talked about your journey, and I've talked about my journey. And for our listeners, I think we have a lot to share in terms of what comes up for people that they may not even have thought of yet or know is, beneath the surface.
Sure. So I think that the number one thing for me was, especially right after surgery and as the weight started to come off, was I didn't know who I was, who I was becoming. I only identified prior to surgery as, obese person, really. That was who I was. My life was run and dictated by the number on the scale. I woke up every morning, and if I got on the scale, that told me who I was. And my belief then was that because I was overweight, obese, that I was less than. So I spent all my years prior to surgery, and even then after, because this is a process of trying to prove to the world that I was not this lazy, fat, obese person, that I was something more than that. Little did I know that none of that thinking was right. It was just, unfortunately, what I had taken from things that were said to me in my life or taken from society. Whether it was true or not, it was how I felt. So that is pre-surgery. My identity was dictated and run by my weight. And then post-surgery, I started to realize, holy moly, I am so much more than the number on the scale. I am so much more than what people see my outsides as.
Right.
I have this whole different person inside. And as the weight shed, I started to realize some of that, and also found a voice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and as you were talking, I was thinking, because I was a very young mom when I had surgery, but your kids were older. So I'm also curious, like, how did your identity also impact your who you were as a mom, who you were in your career as a business owner, because you had a business for a very long time.
Yes.
How did that impact? And this may get personal, and I know I can get personal too, but it's how did it impact as a wife, as a mom, as a, running a household? Because there are so many versions of us that when we think of identity and our core identity, parts of who we are emanate out into all of these different areas. And that changes. But I agree. I totally agree, because I feel like my life was run by food pre-op too.
Mm-hmm. And it does change, it changes. So I had basically two teenagers and a tween daughter. I had two teenage boys and a tween daughter when I had surgery. So there was a lot of conversations in our house about what was happening. I did not keep my surgery a secret from my immediate family. They watched me, my husband included, watched me for years diet. Mm-hmm. And diet and succeed and fail and succeed and fail and succeed and fail. And the year before surgery, I went on a real journey of trying to figure it out. Why am I failing at these diets? And I really started to understand the metabolic disease that I was struggling with and suffering from, and still am suffering, and still do have this metabolic disease condition, whatever. And this is all kind of relatively new science. I mean, the last decade has really started to put a name on what was happening for me. And I didn't understand it until I started reading some things and getting some more knowledge. And I went and saw a specific surgeon who really talked about this. And, so it was, my life changed because I got my power back. My power was no longer dictated by the food that I ate. That first year was tough in a lot of ways. And it was tough in emotional ways I could no longer turn to food to soothe what was discomforting. My relationship with my husband was rocky there for a little while. And, again, we got 3 teenage kids, right? So that's hard enough as it is. And you throw in this aspect of it, all of a sudden, mama, she's losing she's losing it because she can't go eat a bag of Doritos. A lot of volatile, for mom, I wasn't like abusing anyone, but I was having some very short fuses and so I had to work very closely with my therapist, who also, she didn't have a bariatric background, but she understood some of these things, just from other patients who had bariatric surgery, that this was my tool that I had used, which was food, was no longer available to me in the same way. And so I had to create my toolbox differently. It had to look different. And I leaned heavily on my 12-step recovery. And that really guided me in so many ways to success.
Yeah. And then when you look at who you've become, because we all change.
Sure.
And I think sometimes the fear that we have is, who am I going to become? And the thing that I tell people is, you're still you. You're still you. There are things that you still like. It's that the changes that come are, I know There were a lot of things that I loved before surgery, but I was very sedentary because I had a lot of extra weight on my knees and it was very difficult to move. Did I move? Yes, because it was also part of my pre-op procedures and post-op recovery was you got to keep moving. You got to keep moving. And yet, I know for me, my identity really didn't hit a wall of, okay, who the F am I now? So my surgery was in October of 2013, and it was about 2015 when I kind of went into this deep, dark depression. And one of the things that I know, and hopefully this isn't news to people, but as you start losing weight and your fat cells shrink, it's letting out hormones, it's letting out, toxins, it's releasing a lot of other things into your system, right? And that can also throw you off because there's a lot of things that are stored in our fat cells and fat cells shrink. That's the whole, when people say, oh, fat leaves your body, does leave your body through urine and sweat, which I don't know if a lot of people know, but that's how it leaves your body, which is also why water is so important. And that's the science. Yet when you're going through this, there's also those hormonal changes that are happening as well, not specific to menopause, but if you're going through menopause, that can happen, it happens alongside it, but your fat cells shrink. But I didn't really have depression or, I had depression in my 20s, worked through it. And then it was about 2015 where I had this it felt like an identity crisis. Like, who am I now that I've had this surgery, that I've lost this weight? But there were other things that were also coming up because I was also still a new mom. I had a 3-year-old and he might have not even been 3 yet because it's like you remember this, but you don't remember, like it didn't happen from like June to September. It's like I just remember the year. And I just remember feeling, I got to a point, and this I do remember. My husband, he doesn't remember this, but I remember being on the floor, and this is kind of a trigger warning for some folks, but I remember being on the floor of the bathroom crying, and we were living with my parents at the time. So I was in the basement bathroom on the floor, and I was like, at this point, had suicidal ideations, intent, and not quite a plan, but it was getting there. And I just remember thinking, how are they going to live without me? And that's like deep and dark. And I didn't know that that's where I was going to go when I started talking. But I do think it's important for us to address because that's when I decided, okay, I need to get back into therapy. But that's also when, similar to what you're saying, the therapist that I was working with at the time really had no idea about this, hadn't worked with bariatric patients. And so it was like a whole new thing. But the identity was, who am I now in my career as a mom, as a wife, and we were in transition because we had moved from Washington to Atlanta. And this isn't what I wanted for myself. Like I was also, the self-talk was absolutely off the charts. Like, you're such an effing loser. Like, you're living in your parents' basement. Like, you are da 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 da. And we used the sale of our house in Washington partially to pay for surgery and save to put a down payment up here. And it was just, but the self-talk, the judgment, the criticism, and it all lent to, I don't know. And I'm saying I'm using F, not saying the whole word because it was so intense. Like, who the flip am I? I didn't know who I was. And yet I was all of these things to other people, but I didn't know who I was to myself. And I was no longer in this place where I had any foundation that was mine. Everything, the house wasn't mine, right? The surgery was was mine, but it led me to not knowing who I was, right? I knew where I stood in my marriage. And as a mom, as a new mom, that's a whole other conversation. But it's so many things, and you are their world and they're yours. And that was hard because it was day in, day out. And it didn't feel, as much as I love the hell out of him, it was like, that was not my purpose to be a stay-at-home mom. And I had given up my practice and I changed a lot of things. It was like, oh my gosh, who am I? So I know different people have surgeries at different times of their life. And mine just happened to coincide at a place where in 2013, it was like, great, we're doing this. 2014, full steam ahead. 2015, it was like, crash and burn, baby. but sometimes, and I look back, it was an awful time. And yet it was also, it kind of reminds me of the Phoenix rising. Like sometimes we have to crash and burn to be reborn to something new within us. It reminds me that we go through those things not as a destruction, but as an intentional rebirth of who we want to be.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Because what it did is it triggered in me that we no longer could use our weight as an excuse or as a reason our life was X, Y, or Z, right? So we could no longer, we could, and certainly, we have that ability to, but that factor, that excuse is taken away for a lot of people post-surgery. And even if you haven't gotten to your goal weight, whatever that number may be, because, we're talking, magic here, but, whatever, as the weight shed, and we were, having some successes, life is going to continue to go on. And if people struggle with that thought process and think that everything is wrapped up in the success or the failure of this surgery, there's some deep work that needs to be done. We all have deep work that needs to be done, but for you, it was, you were living a point in your life that was just difficult. It was just a challenging time, and it would have been challenging if you'd had surgery or not. And so I remember, and not only do I remember, I had experiences like that and have continued to have. And also, when I, we've coached, work with people, they go through deaths and, divorces and and major health issues.
Job loss, health issues. Oh yeah.
It's how do we navigate that? How do we navigate those tough times in our lives as you are becoming, because we are constantly becoming who we are. It's now, my identity is no longer tied up in the obese Frances. My identity is tied up in the person I am becoming. Because I am not allowing any one thing to dictate who I am, I'm allowing the holistic view of who I am to really propel me into the future. And that, I think, is exactly what you were experiencing, exactly what so many of us experience. And now, I mean, just out of curiosity, what do you feel like was your shift?
So what's really interesting is at that point, I was not done losing weight. So I had probably by this point lost approximately 150 pounds, not the full 200. And it wasn't until, so we bought our house in February 2016, but we didn't buy our house because it had nothing to do with my weight. It was when we moved to Atlanta, and the idea was to stay with them for a little while because we had the grandbaby, right? So it was, to have time, and my dad had a prostate cancer diagnosis. He ended up passing in 2017. Like, there were a lot of other things happening, but there was also, it wasn't just about my identity of living with them. It was, I need my own space. Either they're going to kill me or I'm going to kill them. Like, it was like, I can't do this anymore. I need my own freaking space. And that's what led to that. But also what came up was, when I think back to that point, because there's two separate things that I want to share. The first one was when I was at that point of like on the floor of the bathroom, I identified in Seattle, when I lived in Seattle, I had two office spaces. I had a thriving psychotherapy practice on two different, anybody who knows Seattle, like I had an office in downtown Seattle, and then I had an office on the east side, which is about 40 minutes from each other. And it worked. And it was, I loved it. And I worked with couples, and a lot of people don't know that I did couples therapy and I did individual work, and it was thriving. And when we decided to move, I kind of closed all that up. And so I was working at the time, but I was doing different things. I was doing consulting, I was doing some education stuff. I was doing coaching. But I didn't know if I wanted to go back and do therapy. So I had my whole career, my identity for many, many years, which it was completely wrapped up in my career, right? And then, okay, now I'm a mom. So now I don't have this career in the same grounded way. And now I'm a mom, and now I have to figure out who I am as a mom. And now I'm also living in my parents' basement. And which I say that because it's a very separate space. It wasn't like we had our own bathroom, we had our own bedroom. We didn't have our own kitchen, but it was like, it wasn't an in-law suite or anything, but it was private. But there were things that you had to go upstairs for. And the dynamic reminded me, and we can get into this in another episode, but there were a lot of like codependent vibes, a lot of people-pleasing vibes, a lot of, I felt I couldn't use my voice. Why this ties in and why this is so important as well is that when we bought our house, literally within 6 months of us buying our house and me being in my own space, that last 50 pounds dropped. Because also, even though I had started to eat differently and was improving my health, there were still a lot of things in their kitchen that I wouldn't put in my own kitchen. And I see this with clients too, where they're like, whenever I go to my mom's house, there's stuff on the counter, or when I go to my parents, or when I go to my kid's house, there's all of these goodies there. And it wasn't about willpower. It was emotion regulation. And I was still learning that. And I had a very difficult time emotionally regulating, or even nervous system regulation, which that's not our topic for today. We'll get into that. But I was highly dysregulated a lot of the time, which also wasn't like I didn't feel safe in a primitive, primal safety sense. I didn't feel safe to use my voice. I didn't feel safe in a way. It was like, if I say this, is there a chance that they could kick us out? Is there? And there, I mean, my dad's passed now, but it's like it wasn't a mean thing. It was just when you're in that dynamic, it can be very intense. It can be very fiery. And it was, if I need to do X and I need them to watch the baby on Wednesday, I need to just keep my mouth shut. And some people may know exactly what I'm talking about. Like you swallow, it wasn't the food but sometimes it was at that time, but it was like, I would swallow my voice and not use my voice. And that was, I feel like I was carrying, I hadn't released all of the weight because I was carrying it emotionally for what I had not yet processed. So could that have been also intertwined with the identity stuff of like, okay, I'm thinking about hurting myself. I think that was more of a deep, dark depression because it wasn't, I'm going to hurt myself because of it had nothing to do with that. It was, I can't believe this is my life. This is never what I pictured for myself. This is, and it's, and I, it wasn't, it was all of the things. It wasn't one thing. And the mindset was, it's all overwhelming. I have no control. That was the other thing. And I think the other thing was, I do have control over whether I stay or go. And that was also when it was like, oh, snap, you need to like get in with a therapist quick. And I remember, my husband doesn't remember this, but I remember him crying with me. And I remember telling him, like, I don't know if I want to be here anymore. Like, that's how that's how I verbalized it. And it really was like a singular event, but it had been building, right? It had been building and a confession. And then it was like, okay, we need to get you some support. Like, we need to get you some help, because he's like, my husband's a software engineer. He's like, this is not my wheelhouse. Like, I want to support you, but yeah, I got nothing.
Well, and that's one of the, I think, really important things as we're discovering who we are post-surgery, is having a support system around us.
Yes.
And many of us, as we are, pre-surgery, our support system were cheerleaders of our obesity. They were our friends and family members who supported those habits.
Let's go to the, let's go to Applebee's and get drinks. Let's go to happy hour. Let's go do this. Yeah. Like, there was a ton of that. And also when I moved back here, and it's really funny because people may not know this, and I didn't know you at that time. You were 15 minutes down the road from me. Like, you were 15 minutes down the road from me. We didn't know that because my parents' house is about 15 minutes away from where you live. And, but I also didn't have a close, like, I had friends in Seattle. I had people I hung out with, but I didn't have that sense of community in Atlanta, not until I moved out to where I live now, the house that we bought. Now we have a sense of community and connection. But and I hear what you were talking about is even bariatric community. And at that time, I had gone online and had looked, and this was way before I even started my dissertation or anything. My original dissertation was going to be on like digital nomads or something. It wasn't even about bariatrics. It wasn't until, I think, and this might have been a huge turning point, not just for this, but for what bariatric mindset success became today, because somebody had told me, and I've said this before, somebody told me pre-op, or even at that point in my life in 2015, you're going to be leading people. You're going to be talking about this. I would have been like, shut the front door, like, get out of my face. Like, are you making fun of me? Like, I would have thought it was a joke, a horrible joke. And I probably would have felt shame and embarrassment because I was in such a dark place that I didn't even think that was possible. And it wasn't even, it was like, you want me to take my deepest, darkest wound, my body and my weight, the thing that I've carried shame about my entire life, and I'm going to do what? It wasn't even a consciousness until like 2016, really. So, and I share that just so it's like a timeline, but it's like, also, we don't know. Like, I think I'm still becoming, I'm still shifting. Yep. My identity is shifting. I mean, there's certain things, and I say this and you say this, there's certain things that I love and I like that are parts of who I am, parts that people don't even know about. And it's not like, it's not super secret. I'll share them, but it's just that when you know me, there's certain things, and there's certain things that it's like, oh my gosh, that's so Kristin. And there's some things that you'll know about friends that are like, oh, that's so-and-so, or things like that just make up part of who we are. But how this surgery shifts it, and that was one of the shifts when I come back to like, had to swallow my voice it's similar to what you said is I had to find my voice and I had to find a way to, stand up to my parents, stand up to things and say, I'm not doing this, but in a very respectful way, because the only way I knew how to communicate was passive aggressive.
Sure. We learn that very well. If we're a people pleaser, right? That's, a lot of us come into this as people pleasers, especially women, post-surgery. I mean, how many nurses and teachers and, doctors and, mothers. And I mean, these are the folks that are struggling with this emotional eating. And
I would, attorneys. I also what's really wild is when we look and this, but when I look at like even the demographic of the folks that we work with,
yes,
it's like there are a lot of them in helping professions.
Yes.
There's a lot of helpers, teachers, educators. Yes. We've had college professors, occupational therapists, physical therapists. Yes. I mean, you name it, like nurses. And then we have had our fair share of, medical doctors, attorneys. And so again, we have a women's group. So it's our demographic is like 96% women. And yes. I know men need help. And at some point we'll do a podcast that's geared towards men. It's just that the people who tend to gravitate towards me or towards us, that just have to be, they happen to be more women. And I don't mean to, I'm not excluding men, because I know men have issues too. Men have mindset stuff. There's a lot of, I work with men. I have worked with men. I get it. It's just, that's not predominantly a lot. And there are differences in the issues. So I want to say that, but when we're people pleasers, a lot of times we've learned that it's easier to swallow our truth and again, eat. And I couldn't eat at that point. I mean, it could, right. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't eat my feelings at that point because I was still at 2 years. And I say, man, he gave me a really good sleeve because I couldn't stuff anything extra in there. Sure. I couldn't.
Sure. And you made a good point too, is that this is not a unique situation just to a select few people. This is a broad group of folk that you and I see that are in this coaching, group that you have, mindset shift group. But the number one thing I think is so important is that there's a connection, that we have this connection with each other. I remember thinking when I first sat in one of your first groups, feeling like I've come home, feeling like I have been heard for the first time. I didn't know I was missing it until I sat there and listened to these others' stories, and they had my story. Some of the details were different, but they were speaking to me about the struggles that they had all their life. When I actually listened to your book for the first time, but I've listened to both of them, and they're so profound because it's like she is telling my story. And I gotta know her, right? I mean, I just remember I did a little bit of that. Holy shit, who is this woman? I need to know who she is. And then you do the Facebook stalking and the internet. Like, now I can actually talk to her, right? She's available to me. So I really, as a client first, that was one of those. And I found you in 2020, and I remember thinking, when I, kind of that, identity, right? I came up against that 2020 wall, and we all know what.
And that was a key time too. Cause like when we think you had your surgery in 2018, 2020 was unique for all of us. I mean, and we're recording this in 2025, y'all. So 2020 was unique because of, COVID, obviously. And so that was a whole, like everything is turned upside down. And we were all walking that together. Like none of us, there was no insider, like, oh, let me lead you. It was like, no, we were all like, well, crap.
And it brought out some of the it brought out a lot of our crazy. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, it really did, because we had polar, differences of opinions. But at the end of the day, we sat in these groups, in your group, as with one common purpose. And that was to navigate weight loss after bariatric surgery, and to navigate life after bariatric surgery. Whether it was, we had women, and I remember early on, there were women who just had surgery like early 2020, and then their lives shut down. And the ramifications of that were huge, and are continuing to be huge. They never got to go to their post-op appointments. They never got to see their nutritionist. They were navigating it on their own, and it was terrifying, and it was
isolating. Or they were on Zoom, it was a whole new experience. And then there was no going to the gym. The gyms were shut down. There was no, there was a lot of that. And then I know we had the increase in it's not just emotional eating, but the grazing and the bored eating, right? So
you're at home, you're stuck at home. And actually, I think that's a kind of, as we love to squirrel, because, both of us might have some letters before our,
divergent.
There you go. But that's also something to talk more, there's a connection there, and I'm putting that out there because that's what's so important about this type of, not only not only the group, but even people listening to this. We're connecting to you. This is about, us giving our experiences so that you don't feel so alone in your journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, the whole identity piece isn't about who you should be. I think that, sure, could that carry through? Because we have the media messaging, we have the societal messaging, I literally read an article yesterday about women in the workplace. And it was this article that went back to I think the 1950s or something, or how women were portrayed then and how women are portrayed now. And one of the things that was also portrayed is about thinness. And you're supposed to get it all done and be thin. And I cannot remember where I saw it, and I'm not pulling it up or anything, but what was very profound is that women were overwhelmed, even as homemakers, before the onset of women being full-time in the workplace. And it was oh, take this drug, this will make you feel better or something. And then it was, and make sure that you're thin, make sure you're this. So I think as women, we also get these messages about our identity, which could play into not just the metabolic, you have a metabolic, let's say, disorder, and you've had a metabolic surgery. Absolutely. And sometimes we're here because of the societal messaging. And it's oh, you're supposed to look a certain way. So when there are struggles post-op, are we still buying into that? Or are we looking at, who do I want to be? Because a lot of folks can get stuck in, you were saying this earlier, in that idea of perfectionism or what we're supposed to be. And I go, based on who? Who telling you this? And it could be the messages you received from your mother as a child, because we work with women like that. It's, and I can even think back to 2020. There was a woman, a woman I was working with that her mother gave her diet pills at 5. There's so much trauma in that and so much trauma when we think of, who am I supposed to be? It's not just what we've talked about in all these areas of your life, but if your primary message is your body is a problem, and it's coming from your primary caregiver who's supposed to be taking care of you and loving you the most, that does some messed up stuff to your brain in terms of who you think you're supposed to be. because it reminds me, I don't know who said it, but I know someone said it, is your body is not an ornament. And I think that's the thing is there's form, there's function, and we can feel good and we can want to look good. At what point does that take over our identity? And at what point are we saying, I'm so much more than just a body. I'm so much more, same thing. I'm so much more than just my career. I'm so much more than just a mom. I'm so much more than just a wife. I'm so much more than just these things. We're multifaceted, and that's part of our identity. And after surgery, when it's not to say that we're going to be done worrying about our weight, yet it almost is like this vacuum to some extent, because it's not that we're not worried about food, because I still see folks like, what am I supposed to eat? What am I supposed to do? Yet the identity piece of, well, who am I going to be when, or who am I now? How do I interact now? That's the thing that we get to figure out. And that is a journey, and it's going to be different for everyone. There are no like, okay, Jane, come on in. Here are the 10 things you need to do to figure out who you are. And I've had people go, I need steps. And I'm like it's not like, here, this is how much protein you need. This is how much water you need. Your identity is in flux and flow. Like, you know this, we've worked with women who have climbed mountains, who travel the world, who have changed careers, who have left jobs, who have started dating after 20 years. Like, that doesn't happen from, well, did you complete number 3? Like, it doesn't come from like, it's, 12-step is important. I'm not minimizing that. But what I wanted to say is it doesn't come from a 12 steps that you check off. There are no boxes to check with identity shifts. It's kind of like just something you go through and explore when you're not dieting anymore. Because I think dieting takes up so much time that I think we've collectively, as weight loss surgery patients, like, we know how to lose it, and lose and gain, but do we know how to be
right?
Enjoy.
And that is absolutely 100%. We are not, our identity is not a stagnant space. It is a constant, ever moving. We are becoming. And I don't believe that we will ever, at the end of the day, sit down and say, oh, I'm here, I've arrived. I don't believe that happens. And when we let go of that expectation and understand that this is a journey, it is life. It is life post bariatric surgery. It is life post GLP-1 weight loss. It is life post whatever, post children, post marriage, post, whatever you want to add in there. It is lifing, and we have to be receptive to anything that comes along and be willing to look at the part that we play in our success.
Yeah. And it's, we're going to have even more, like, none of us saw 2020 coming. Like, none of us saw COVID coming. I mean, I sure as heck didn't. So we're going to continue to have that. And I don't say that to be fear-based. Absolutely not. It's a way, it happened, and how we dealt with it tested the coping mechanisms and the tools that we had in place. It's almost like, the word that keeps coming to mind is like a recalibration, but it's not a test. It's not a test like, okay, God, spirit, universe, whoever your higher power, however you talk. It's like, are you testing me? It's like, it's not that kind of test. It's just life. But I think there's this expectation that we're like at this static linear pace. And that's not life. And the weight loss journey is not going to be like that either. And, one of the other things I thought of is I had a client about a year ago say, I don't identify with, she is a weight loss surgery patient, but she said, I don't really relate with the bariatric community anymore based on where I am. And I'm like, okay, and so some people may, and some people may not. And sometimes, and she's fairly far out from surgery. I want to say she's like 9 years out or something. That may happen for people. It's interesting because I was thinking about that in terms of identity. I don't identify or de-identify. I think that because it's something that I know I'm going to be living with, like my son and I went to a restaurant at the end of his school year. We've been out for lunch and it's like, I'm almost 12 years out. I had to tell the waitress, I have a smaller stomach. Like, I'm just not gonna da 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 da. And it was like, gosh, I haven't had to say that in a while. So it's like, we just kind of, we're becoming, to your point. And after a while, we forget because we're just living our lives because it's something we've adapted to. And it's just part of who we are. And then when we go out in the world and we recognize, oh, not everybody has smaller stomachs. I may need to communicate this so that they understand, like, oh yeah, I'm not, going to have that, or I need this a little bit different. And that is sometimes a reminder. But when we're on this journey for a while, it becomes so much that we've adapted to our new identity that it doesn't come out as much. And then we're like, oh, that was interesting. I hadn't said that in a while. Because it's also, who are we communicating with? How are we communicating it? And who am I now? I'm still a bariatric surgery patient. I'm still on a journey. So are you. And I still am learning, as we all are, about who we are. And I think identity, even for non-weight loss surgery patients, again, whether you're on a GLP-1 or whether you're on a weight loss journey or not, I think that becoming doesn't end at all. Like we're still, it's just a big, it does create this big shakeup in your life to go, okay, who am I? Who am I now?
That's and understanding that it's going to constantly come up for us as humans. We're going to experience these times in our lives where we're not 100% sure where we stand and where we sit. And that's where growth happens. Growth happens when we get uncomfortable, and bariatric surgery creates a lot of uncomfortableness. And so we get the opportunity to grow with it and use it as a place to continue to further our personal growth.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of final thoughts in wrapping up. And I'll answer this question too, but if you had somebody going through identity shifts, well, we all know people who are, right? Yeah. And you were to give them maybe some prompts or some questions to think about, or some reflections or suggestions, tips. What would you offer?
Sure. So I think the first thing I would do is ask them to write down, if they were to ask their best friend who they were. And to write that down. And, like if I were to, or even as an exercise, ask that person, say, hey, can you tell me who I am to you? And because people who are closest to us can really help us see through our own crappy filters at times. I mean,
our self-talk.
Yeah, right. I know that who I think I am, I'm using air quotes here, who I think I am is not actually who the world sees me and how the world sees me. So to ask a best friend or even a spouse, who am I to you? And And now, they may add some things in there that you may not like, or they may add some things in there that you're like, oh, that's good.
I'm asking that question to my husband because I'm going to get some smart ass sarcastic answers.
Yeah. And I'm right there with you. So asking those questions and writing that down, that's what I would do. That would be the first exercise. And then looking at that and taking that and saying, okay, I believe that to be true. I am a mother. I believe, I'm kind. I believe that to be true. Whatever that person says to me, ask yourself, do you find that to be your truth? And if you don't find that to be your truth, be curious about why that person would think that of you and why you don't feel that way, and see if you can't reconcile some of that within yourself. So that's what I think that would be my first jumping point with somebody, as a coach, because I'm not a therapist. I don't want anyone to ever think that I'm giving them therapeutic advice. I am truly a coach. I want to help coach you to be the best you can be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I think values are really important. And I do think that like a value driven life, and that is, it gets a little bit more in the weeds, right? Because it's like, well, what are our values? Like that could lead into a whole totally different conversation. But I would definitely ask, like, what are the values, or what do you value?
Yes.
What do you value? Before answering, like, what are your values and what's important to you? What's important to you and why? So it's not what is my why. I do think that is important as well. But I think in navigating who am I now, I do think we can start to look at the different areas of our life, which is, again, who am I as, and we have clients that aren't mothers in a baby sense, but they're pet parents, or they have dogs or cats, or they are mothers in a different sense where they have fur babies, right? So it's like, who are you as a mom to your fur babies, or who are you as a mom, or who are you as a partner or a spouse? Who are you as in a career? And we work with, also women in retirement. So like, who are you in retirement? And how does that, and I go, who am I in these areas, or what do I think about myself? Where it's not even a scorecard. It's not about judgment yet, but who do I want to be? Are these, and because what we also want to say, the other thing I want to say is nothing is stagnant. Nothing is stagnant. We can change those things. Our identity, there are certain things that do, I've read things that say, oh, your values don't change. I think that it depends. It really depends. And yet when we start to ask, what do you value in life? It's also going to give you, because you may have people that say, oh, wow, I really value my alone time. Somebody else may say, I really value travel. And you may think that isn't about you, but it really is, because it's how you want to spend your time, right? So it's, what do you value about health? Okay, I value my health. I think that's another part of the identity. It's not going to give everyone everything. I think this is a very expansive topic. We're only hitting maybe a 10th. But even when it comes to mental health issues, because I shared something, I will also just share, if you are having mental health issues, I highly recommend that you work with a therapist, to help you if you're struggling with depression, anxiety, because it was at that 2015 point that I realized, oh, I have anxiety. Oh, and I also have ADHD. Oh, I didn't know that before. And I'm trained. So we can miss those things in ourselves. It doesn't mean that we're faulty. It just means that we need more self-awareness about those things. So I think self-awareness is key, and that can be where we can do more exploratory questions. And we need more curiosity and less judgment. And yes. I feel like those are maybe not complete opposites, but when you're in judgment about who you are, or your body, or where you're not yet, or who you think you are, who you don't think you are, shift over to curiosity shift over to curiosity in a way of, well, what if this is possible? What if this were to be different? Start asking what if questions in a very curious way. And what if this were to shift? I think that curiosity is going to be your friend. And the judgment is where we get bogged down. And that's where the self-talk and the self-criticism goes wild. Because when we're holding on to judgment and where we're not yet or perfect or whatever, it becomes, and I'm going to use the O word, overwhelming. And then it's like we get stuck in the muck. And so shifting out of judgment into curiosity about what can be, about who you want to be, and letting go of the attachment or and I'm closing fists because sometimes we hold so tightly to criticism and judgment. What would it look like if I accepted XYZ about myself? What are the things that I struggle with accepting? What if? Curiosity. And that would be a great starting point. It is not the be all end all. I will say that it's not the be all end all because there's so many other questions, but for the sake of time and for the sake of kind of like closing, I think that is just a really good place for a lot of people to start is, can I be curious with who I am and who I want to be, and maybe who others expected me to be. And I've been playing a part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And is it time for you to shift out of whatever that part is that society, your parents, whoever else told you? It's like that saying, who were you before the world told you who to be? It's like you creating an identity shift is really in this journey is also about you being the main character in your story, you being the hero of your story, you being the protagonist. And you'll hear that more coming from me and us, is that main character energy, because you're the main character of your life. We're all, I'm the main character of my life. Frances is the main character of her life. But when we've been playing a supporting role in our own lives, when we're in the back seat, maybe allowing food to drive or other things, and we shift into being in the driver's seat, making the decisions, it shifts. We shift. And that's where it's not so much about control, it's about possibility. It's about possibility and becoming. So that's, without going into any other rabbit holes, that's all that I've got. But curiosity.
That's key. I think it's key to our personal successes is to be curious about why we think the way that we think and why we do the things the way that we do. We can find answers there. So.
And open. Yeah.
Yep. And open.
Yeah. Thank you again for sharing this topic with me today and for being here. And I'm so grateful. And I know we'll do future episodes together. So thank you, Frances.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. Once again, you can feel free to visit bariatricmindsetsuccess.com or bariatricmindset.substack, which is also where we have the blog. So come check us out there and keep listening because we have even more breakthroughs and goodies to come. So thank you, everybody. I am signing off, Dr. Kristin Lloyd with the Bariatric Mindset Success podcast. Sending love. Bye, everyone.
All right, everyone, that's a wrap for today's episode of the Bariatric Mindset Success podcast. So grateful that you tuned in for all of the goodness that we were sharing today. Remember, transformation is not about getting it perfect. It's about showing up for yourself one decision at a time. And if this episode hit home for you, please share it with a friend, leave a review, and tag me on socials at Bariatric Mindset because, friends, we rise higher together and it helps more people to find this life-changing work. And if you want more support on your journey, grab one of my free trainings or check out our programs at www.bariatricmindsetsuccess.com. And don't forget to connect with us on social media at Bariatric Mindset, at all the channels, because you deserve a community that gets it. Until next time, stay rooted, stay real, and remember, you are your greatest success story in the making. Sending you a ton of love, and I'll see you next time. Bye.